Welcome back, everyone. Today we're really diving deep, going behind the scenes of the Trump White House, using Bob Woodward's book Fear as our guide.
Oh, this is a good one.
It is. It's packed with firsthand accounts
From
the people who were actually there, hundreds of hours of interviews.
Right.
It gives us a raw, pretty unfiltered look at what went on. So if you're ready for, I guess, some serious insider baseball, buckle up. We're about to take a wild ride
I'm ready.
through some key decisions, some big conflicts, and those larger-than-life personalities that really defined those early years.
Yeah, the Trump administration's early years, it's really quite remarkable how Woodward pulls back the curtain. You really see how this administration worked. Very unconventional. I mean, you'll see a side of the presidency that most people don't get to witness. The unpredictable nature of Trump's leadership, the constant power struggles. I mean, just the sheer chaos.
Oh, yeah.
It just seemed to engulf the White House from day one.
Yeah. Let's start at the very beginning, even before the official campaign kicked off.
Oh,
Steve Bannon,
right?
the mastermind behind Trump's rise. Initially, he thought the whole presidential run was a complete joke.
It's true. He dismissed it.
Really?
Yeah, he told Republican activist David Bossie that he had, quote, no time for that nonsense.
Wow.
But Bossie was persistent. He was convinced that Trump had something unique to offer. He finally managed to get Bannon in a room with Trump, and that's where things get really interesting.
So during this meeting, Bannon and Bossie basically gave Trump a crash course in, like, Politics 101.
Yeah.
And it quickly became apparent that Trump was operating from a completely different playbook.
Totally.
He pointed out some pretty glaring issues.
Yeah.
Like Trump's pro-choice stance and spotty voting record. These things could have been major liabilities in a Republican primary.
You would think those revelations would have given Trump pause, but no, his response was completely unexpected. He brushed it off. He would just say things like, that can be fixed, or maybe none of this matters.
Oh.
It showed a complete disregard for the traditional rules of the game, and it really foreshadowed that unconventional approach, that he would bring to the White House.
Bannon was struck by this. He compared Trump to a really focused Archie Bunker, a mix of charisma and bluntness that really resonated with a certain segment of the electorate. But beneath that persona, there were knowledge gaps that needed to be filled. And fast.
That's where Bannon came in. I mean, he essentially became Trump's his tutor in politics.
Interesting.
He saw something in Trump, a certain command presence that he believed could be harnessed, shaped into a powerful force.
And as Trump's campaign gained momentum, we begin to see the emergence of those key players who would later become major figures in his administration.
Yeah.
Rians Primus trying to bridge the gap between the Republican establishment and this outsider candidate.
And then you've got Kellyanne Conway, the master communicator, spinning Trump's often controversial statements into something palatable for the masses.
And of course, there's Jared Kushner,
Oh, yeah.
Trump's son-in-law, stepping into a role that blurred the lines between family and politics.
Oh, absolutely. Right from the start, we see these individuals jockeying for position, vying for influence, and often clashing over, strategy, ideology. It sets the stage for the power struggles that would define the Trump White House.
One of the most vivid examples of this internal conflict comes in the form of a stolen letter. We're talking about Gary Cohn, Trump's chief economic advisor, literally swiping a letter from Trump's desk to prevent him from withdrawing the U.S. from a major trade agreement.
The U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement, also known as KORUS. I mean, this incident wasn't just about a policy disagreement. It was a desperate act to protect the country from what Cohn saw as reckless, potentially damaging decision.
It was a move so bold that some called it an administrative coup d'etat.
Mm-hmm.
And Cohn wasn't the only one taking such drastic measures.
Mm-hmm.
Rob Porter, Trump's staff secretary, described his job as constantly having to slow walk or block Trump's more impulsive ideas. Imagine the pressure of trying to manage a president who seemed determined to, upend the established order.
Makes you wonder, What would happen if these individuals hadn't stepped in? What other decisions were made or averted behind closed doors?
Yeah.
Woodward provides, I think, a fascinating glimpse into this shadow government operating within the White House,
Right.
where advisors felt they had to go to extraordinary lengths to keep things from spiraling out of control.
It's like they were playing a constant game of chess,
Yeah,
anticipating Trump's next move and trying to maneuver him in a direction that would minimize damage
right.
and maintain some semblance of stability. But as you'll see, this delicate balancing act could only last for so long. So we've seen how those advisors like Gary Cohn, Rob Porter tried to manage Trump's impulses, during those early days. But as the administration moved forward, the challenge is only intensified. One event that really put the spotlight on those internal tensions was the decision to launch a military strike in Syria after that horrific chemical weapons attack.
Yeah, this was April 2017, just a few months into Trump's presidency. Images of children killed by sarin gas flooded the news. I mean, there was immense pressure, both domestically and internationally, for the U.S. to respond
Yeah, wow.
forcefully.
Trump's initial reaction was very visceral. He wanted to hit Syria hard, even suggesting that they target Syrian President Bashar al-Assad himself.
Oh, wow.
This is where we see that disconnect, between Trump's instinctual reactions and the realities of foreign policy.
His advisors, particularly James Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, urged caution. They argued that such an escalation, I mean, it could lead to unintended consequences, potentially drawing the U.S. into a wider conflict. Mattis favored a more measured response, targeting the Syrian military infrastructure, that was involved in that chemical attack.
What's interesting is that Mattis actually saw this as an opportunity to differentiate Trump from Obama, who had been criticized, I guess, for his inaction after a similar chemical attack back in 2013. Mattis believed a decisive but limited strike could demonstrate American strength, without getting bogged down in another Middle Eastern quagmire.
Trump ultimately agreed to a limited strike, launching 59 Tomahawk missiles at a Syrian airbase. It was a significant departure, from his his more aggressive impulses, but it still sent a strong message to the Assad regime and the world that the use of chemical weapons would not be tolerated.
The strike was widely praised by both Democrats and Republicans. And for a brief moment, it seemed like Trump was finding his footing on the world stage, right? He had listened to his advisors, he weighed the options, and he took decisive action. But that moment of unity was fleeting.
Just as quickly as that consensus emerged, it fractured. And then another major decision that exposed those deep divisions within the administration was Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
This was a landmark global agreement signed by nearly 200 countries, aimed at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It was a signature achievement of the Obama administration and a cornerstone of international efforts to combat climate change. But Trump had vowed to pull out of it during his campaign.
His advisors were, they were deeply split on this issue. Some like Ivanka Trump and Gary Cohn argued that staying in the agreement was crucial for maintaining America's, global leadership, its credibility on environmental issues. They even drafted language that would allow the U.S. to remain in the accord, but renegotiate the terms to be, more favorable to American interests.
But others, like Steve Bannon and Scott Pruitt, the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, they pushed hard for a complete withdrawal. They argued that the agreement would harm American jobs, hinder economic growth, and infringe on U.S. sovereignty.
Trump, ever the showman, seemed to relish this internal drama. He held highly publicized meetings where, his advisors fiercely debated the issue in front of him, almost as if he were presiding over, like a reality TV show. It was a stark contrast to, the more traditional behind closed doors policymaking process.
In the end, Trump sided with the hardliners, announcing in June 2017 that the U.S. would pull out of the Paris Agreement. This decision sparked international condemnation, and it further solidified the perception of Trump as an isolationist president who was willing to put America's interests ahead of global cooperation.
These two decisions, the Syria strike and the Paris withdrawal, really highlight the conflicting impulses at play within the Trump administration. There was this desire to project American strength, shake up the established global order, but there was also this deeply ingrained skepticism of international agreements, multilateral institutions.
And then there was the issue that loomed over everything, casting a shadow over the entire presidency. The Russia investigation. This was a constant source of stress, tension, and distraction for the administration.
Trump viewed the investigation as a politically motivated witch hunt from the very beginning, convinced it was an attempt by his opponents to delegitimize his victory, to undermine his presidency. This belief fueled a deep distrust of the intelligence community and law enforcement agencies. He saw them as being aligned against him.
And that frustration only intensified when James Comey, the FBI director, refused to pledge his personal loyalty to Trump and continued to pursue the Russia probe, very aggressively. Comey's independence and his refusal to back down was a constant thorn in Trump's side.
This clash ultimately led to Trump firing Comey in May 2017, a decision that backfired, spectacularly. It triggered a firestorm of criticism, accusations of obstruction of justice, and it ultimately led to the appointment of Robert Mueller as special counsel to take over that Russia investigation.
The firing of Comey marked a major turning point, in that Russia saga, ratcheting up the pressure on the administration and setting in motion a chain of events that would consume the Trump presidency, for years to come.
As Mueller's investigation gained momentum, Trump's anger and paranoia grew, creating an increasingly toxic atmosphere within the White House. He lashed out at his advisors, raged at the press. He just seemed to be constantly on edge, convinced that there were forces working against him at every turn.
The book reveals several instances where Trump considered firing Mueller, only to be talked out of it by his lawyers, who warned him of the potential legal and political ramifications of such a move.
This period of uncertainty and instability, it took a toll on everyone involved. The constant churn of staff, the leaks, the investigations. It created a climate of fear and suspicion where it was difficult to know who to trust.
And if the Russian investigation wasn't enough, the administration also had to grapple with a series of self-inflicted crises. Most notably, Trump's controversial response to the white supremacist rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, in August 2017.
This was a moment that truly tested Trump's leadership and exposed the deep racial divisions within the country. When white nationalists marched in Charlottesville to protest the removal of a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee, violence erupted, culminating in the death of a counter-protester who was struck by a car driven by a white supremacist.
The Charlottesville rally and the violence that erupted there, it really put Trump's leadership to the test. It forced him to address this issue of racism and extremism head on, and his response was, to put it mildly, controversial.
His initial reaction was to condemn the violence on many sides, and that statement drew immediate criticism for drawing a false equivalence between, the white supremacists who organized the rally and those who opposed them. He seemed reluctant to single out white supremacy as the primary source of the violence, a stance that many saw as a dog whistle to, his far-right supporters.
Faced with mounting backlash, he later gave a more forceful denunciation of racism and bigotry, specifically calling out neo-Nazis and white supremacists. It seemed like he was trying to course correct, to reassure the country that he understood the gravity of the situation.
But then in a move that baffled many, he backtracked.
Wow.
Reverting to his initial both sides rhetoric.
Really?
He even claimed there were very fine people on both sides.
Oh, wow.
A statement that further inflamed the situation and fueled those accusations that he was sympathetic to white nationalist views.
The Charlottesville episode really damaged Trump's standing with a large segment of the American public, particularly those who were already concerned about his rhetoric and policies on race and immigration. It reinforced that perception that he was a divisive figure, unwilling or unable to fully confront that issue of white supremacy.
It also highlighted, those deep racial divisions within the country and the challenges of bridging those divides in such a polarized political environment.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've explored the events, the decisions, the conflicts that defined the Trump White House. Now let's shift our focus to the individuals who had to navigate this tumultuous landscape, the key players in the Trump administration.
Bob Woodward doesn't just tell their stories. He peels back the layers to reveal their motivations, their internal struggle. The toll this experience took on them, both personally and professionally.
One of the most compelling figures in the book is James Mattis. Trump's Secretary of Defense, he's often portrayed as the adult in the room,
Right.
a steady hand,
Yeah.
a voice of reason amidst all the chaos and dysfunction.
Hmm.
When a respected military leader with decades of experience, he commanded a deep respect from both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, Mattis was a firm believer in the importance of alliances, a strong military, and a clear-eyed view of, the threats facing America.
Right.
He saw his role as educating Trump on, those complex foreign policy issues, trying to steer him towards a more traditional, measured approach.
The book recounts a telling anecdote where Trump, after attending a military parade in France, became obsessed with having his own grand military parade in Washington D.C.
Right.
He wanted tanks rolling down Pennsylvania Avenue, a display of American might that he believed would project strength and inspire awe.
Mattis, he tried to explain, those logistical challenges, the cost, the message it would send to our allies and adversaries. But Trump wouldn't budge. He fixated on the optics, the image of military power on full display. It was like a classic Trump move, prioritizing spectacle over substance, ignoring the advice of experts in favor of his gut instincts.
It really captures that disconnect,
Right.
between Trump's focus on appearances and Mattis's focus on strategy and long-term, national security interests.
Yeah.
Mattis wasn't interested in flashy displays of power. He was concerned with maintaining America's global leadership and ensuring the military was prepared for, real-world challenges.
Then there's Rex Tillerson,
Right.
Trump's first Secretary of State.
Mm.
He came into the job with a wealth of experience from his time as CEO of ExxonMobil, accustomed to leading a large, complex organization. But even he was unprepared for the chaos and dysfunction of the Trump White House.
Tillerson was a more traditional figure, a believer in diplomacy, the power of, alliances and the established norms of international relations. He clacks with Trump on a range of issues, from the Iran nuclear deal to the Paris Climate Accord. He saw Trump's impulsive, unpredictable style as a threat to America's credibility on the world stage.
The book even claims that Tillerson privately referred to Trump as a moron after a particularly frustrating meeting.
Wow.
Whether true or not, the anecdote speaks volumes about the level of frustration and disillusionment that Tillerson felt during his time in the administration.
Tillerson ultimately resigned in March 2018, another casualty of the Trump administration's tumultuous first year. His departure was seen by many as a sign of the administration's instability and its growing isolation on the world stage.
H.R. McMaster, Trump's second national security advisor, had a similarly challenging tenure. He too was a believer in a strong American role in global affairs,
Yeah.
a proponent of traditional alliances and a rules-based international order. But his worldview often clashed with Trump's America First agenda.
McMaster tried to bring order and process to the National Security Council, but he struggled to manage Trump's unpredictable decision making and his tendency to bypass those traditional channels.
Yeah.
He frequently found himself sidelined or overruled, his advice ignored in favor of Trump's gut instincts.
He was eventually replaced by John Bolton, a much more hawkish figure whose views were more aligned with Trump's. Bolton was a strong advocate for military intervention and a hardline stance, against America's adversaries. His appointment signaled a shift towards a more aggressive foreign policy, one that emphasized unilateral action and a willingness to use force.
And then there's John Kelly, the retired four-star Marine general who served as Trump's second chief of staff. Kelly came into the White House with a reputation for discipline and order,
Right.
determined to impose structure on a chaotic West Wing.
Yeah.
He tried to limit access to Trump, control the flow of information, to create a more orderly decision-making process.
But even Kelly, with his military background and no nonsense demeanor, couldn't fully tame that Trumpian chaos. He clashed with Trump on numerous occasions, finding himself constantly battling against the president's impulses, his disregard for protocol, and his tendency to make decisions based on personal whims rather than careful deliberation.
Kelly's influence waned over time, and he eventually left the administration, another casualty of the constant turmoil, infighting that that plagued the Trump White House.
These are just a few of the key players,
Mhm.
who tried to navigate those treacherous waters of the Trump administration. Each one brought their own experiences, their own perspectives, their own hopes and fears to the table. And each one in their own way was tested by the unique challenges of working for Donald Trump.
Fear offers a fascinating and often unsettling look at the human toll of this turbulent presidency. It's a story of ambition, loyalty, betrayal, and the constant struggle to maintain some semblance of order in a White House that seemed to thrive on chaos.
So what does it all mean? What are the key takeaways from our deep dive into fear?
One thing that's clear is that the Trump White House was a highly dysfunctional place,
Hmm.
marked by constant infighting,
Hmm.
a disregard for traditional processes, and an impulsive decision-making style that often put the country at risk. I mean, it was a presidency unlike any other in American history, one that tested the very foundations of our democracy.
Another takeaway is that Trump's personality was at the center of it all. His narcissism, his distrust of experts, his need for constant validation, all of these traits shaped the way he governed. He surrounded himself with loyalists, often valuing personal loyalty over competence or experience. He made decisions based on gut instinct rather than careful analysis, and he showed little regard for the norms and institutions that had long guided American governance.
And fear really raises those important questions about the future of American democracy. If a president can act with such impunity, disregard norms and institutions, and operate with such disregard for the rule of law, I mean, what does that mean for the long-term health of our republic?
It's a sobering thought, and it's one that we all need to grapple with as we move forward. Fear doesn't provide all the answers, but it does offer a powerful and unsettling glimpse into a presidency that challenged many of our assumptions about how American government works.
Absolutely. And on that note, we encourage you to dive into fear yourselves.
Yeah.
Explore the stories, the personalities, the decisions that shaped this pivotal moment in our nation's history. And as you read, think about the lessons we can learn from this experience. What does it tell us about ourselves, about our leaders, about the fragility of our democracy, and most importantly, what can we do to ensure that something like this never happens again?
We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a fascinating topic. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.
Great.